Hey everybody, it's Ron over at Becoming Enlightened Together. So we're just going to do a couple of reads today. I miss a day. I try to, put a couple of readings in the next day or whatever the case may be. I'm trying to be consistent as much as I possibly can in lieu of everything that's happening. So I apologize, that it's not as consistent as I would like it to be in terms of those who do this for a living, do this daily. I'm trying to do it every day, but sometimes I do get sidetracked with many other things that come up. So, alright, now with that disclaimer, let's go ahead and get right into it. Okay, so the overall energy of the week is Sowillo, and Sowillo looks like the lightning bolt. You may have seen it in old World War II documentaries and so on, as far as the Nazi SS. They've adopted it on their regalia, put it on their lapels and everything else, and of course that gave that particular rune a bad name, so to speak. Guilt by association, but it's a very positive rune ordinarily, and it talks about again, one of the most enlightening, the brightest, of the runes in terms of being the equivalent of the sun card in the tarot deck, which is the brightest card in that deck. And it speaks about many of the same, qualities. It talks about clarity of vision, the sun, honor. It talks about achievement, goals being achieved. It talks about health, the life cycle, or things of that nature, in a time when power is available to you for whatever positive changes that you're trying to produce in your life. It talks about success. It talks about victory. It talks about contact between the higher forces and your subconscious. It talks about wholeness, power, elemental forces. It talks about attack. So probably one of the major reasons why it was adopted in terms of military arm of Nazi Germany at that time, Anyways, so that was the overall energy for the week in general. Now, what we have that showed up this day, the other day we had Odin and his son Thor show up twice, and Thor came up twice in the reverse, which are very, very negative. This time I have Odin, but I also have Freyja, and Freyja showed up twice today, and she's in the upright, however, and that's very, very positive. But let's get to Odin first. Now, Odin's rune is Ansus. Ansus talks about the ancestral god. It talks about wisdom. It talks about communication, the power of words and naming. Words as in the power of life and death is in the tongue, kind of a concept. We see in Christianity, it's echoed in this one as well. It talks about blessings, taking advice, harmony and truth. Talks about tests, perhaps, going through an apprenticeship of sorts. Some of us are being initiated to the next highest realm and so on, the next highest evolutionary ladder, if you will, in terms of our spiritual growth. We just, like I said, ended a very long cycle, and for those who have, stood firm and persisted, there is, again, that crowning, so to speak, that's going to take place. So good health, harmony are also part of Odin's mighty rune. Now, in terms of the present energy, we have Ewas. Now, Ewas is basically about the horse or horses, transportation, wheels of a car, the car itself, a carriage, a cart, progress, transportation, moving, movement. It talks about working in harmony, though, like two horses working together, they have to be in rhythm with one another, or the horse and the rider, they need to be in harmony with one another, or things are, let's just say they're going to be very, very uncomfortable for both the horse and the rider. So there's a method to riding a horse. You don't just sit there and say giddy up and that the rest is history, so to speak. You'll be very, very sore after just a very short time if you don't know what you're doing. Okay? Now, again, it also talks about, progress. Talks about teamwork, as I was intimating there. Talks about, in other words, harmony, trust, loyalty, an ideal relationship or marriage, or partnership for that matter. Talks about confirmation beyond doubt of the runes around it. So everything else that's in this, very positive, everything being in the upright reading. We also have a second confirmation with Iwas being right in the middle of the reading. All of the other runes, beyond doubt, are legitimate in this case. And what do we have? The next two runes that we pulled are the same. That means for the future energy, what we have is Freyja's, or Frigg's, mighty rune. Now, they're two separate entities, or deities, both goddesses. One is the wife of Odin, and they're basically both warrior goddesses. And they have many, many other attributes that are associated to them both. And I don't want to get into the mythology, or I'll be here all day. I mean, it's very elaborate. It's interesting to me, but, to say the least, there's a lot that goes into Freyja's energy when it's in the upright. It's all about wealth. It's about abundance. It's about health, possessions, your material gains. It's, it'd be like the king and queen of pentacles, so to speak. We're talking about, actually, it'd be more like, one of the major arcana cards that deals specifically with just the pentacles. I can't remember which one it is. I mean, it's hard to jump from one to the next because they are different, even though they're both divination. But anyways, it'll come to me as I stop trying to think about it. So anyway, this is our future energy, and nothing better, right? To say that health, wealth, and all materialistic desires are going to basically be made manifest to us. We're getting a lot of the things that, at least in this world, that we often need and or desire. So I know a lot of us, we didn't look at money, gold, and position and all that kind of stuff as being the end-all, be-all. It was just, a means to an end for us, where others, that was all there is. They were so wrapped up into the materialistic world, they couldn't see the spiritual. For us, it's exactly the opposite. But these things are being added on to us all the same. And we should not deny that of our journey. Even though it's a materialistic thing, we are here in the material world doing spiritual things, yes. So, God wants to, shower blessings upon His children. By all means, we should take that and be very, very thankful, that those things are indeed gifts from the Most High, from our ancestors and so on and so forth. So, thank you. And the obstacles and challenges also happens to be that of the materialistic world, or, again, Fehu. Okay? Now, again, why would that be under obstacles and challenges? Well, you know how it is. They say that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, the same thing with materialistic power. Once you're given this type of, wealth that is being more or less intimated here, that it could actually lead to getting off the beaten track, or what our actual mission here in this world is. So we want to, use that as a heads up, an admonition, to stay very balanced and aware, because you are there to enjoy, the fruits of your labor and, everything that you had to endure to get to this point. But don't let it consume you, is really what I'm getting at. Everything in balance. Everything that I have discovered is about balance. Even though people, some that I actually admire and care for, actually would argue against that. I argue and counter that I see it everywhere. I see it in science. I see it in dogma and religious, and all the religions, I might add. I feel it in spirituality. I see it literally everywhere. So I do believe that balance is something that we are to learn about and to try to first, find within our own lives and maintain within our own lives. Again, even we're looking at the esoteric and the occultic, even some of the darker occultic works. When you really look at it, again, it talks about a form of balance. Even though they tend to use things that are completely unbalanced, they really stem to one side of, I'll just use the three pillars for example of Rosicrucianism, but we see that also echoed, in the tree. Again, forgive me because I get brain dead when I get on screen, but the the tree of life, in the Kabbalah, so to speak. You have the basic three pillars are represented there as well, but there's more to it than that. It's a little bit more complex in that particular scenario, but only the one in the middle goes all the way up, I'll just say. So on the one side, you'll have the absolute extreme in terms of materialism, that would be Satan. And then you have the other pillar, which is the absolute right, if you will, or actually left, and that would be Lucifer, which actually represents the light or the spiritual side. Now, the spiritual side has nothing to do with the materialistic thing. They don't even consider it. And same thing with the materialistic. They don't even consider the spiritual, so to speak. For them, it's of no value, irrelevant, so to speak. But to marry all of that together in a balanced way leads you, if you will, to heaven. So, and again, I could echo some of the dogma as well that could lead us into that way of thinking, but I'm not here to preach. I'm just here to say some of the things that I've discovered along the ways in terms of, marrying the spiritual side of, my beliefs along with, science and everything else that I have studied, So that's just my perspective, and of course, you're free to believe whatever you wish. Now, in terms of our future, what we have is another very, very positive rune, and that's Wunyo, and Wunyo in the upright. In fact, every one of the runes in this particular read were in the upright. So this is to give encouragement to the collective. I mean, you did a lot of hard work. You went through an awful lot, a lot of tests, a lot of challenges. You've lost a lot of people along the way. You've had your heart broken multiple times along the way. You've been stolen from. You've been slandered. Every number of possible things that could have happened to you happened, just like in the story of Job, again in the Old Testament. And he persisted, and he was blessed 10 times or, tenfold what he had originally. Now, same thing with you, okay? Now, what Wunyo stands for in the upright is basically the wind. And again, that's usually associated with the intellect, thinking, making sound decisions, justice, truth, ethics, and clarity. Those are all traits basically carried under air. Now, when we're talking about, in this particular case, it still applies, but it also talks about the harmony and joy and blessings that come with that aspect. Even though it doesn't specifically marry those things, in terms of what, the many authors who studied runes, put together in this. They basically take it from the many different, like the Prose Edda and stuff like that, the many stories that talk about these runes, in the rune lore, presumably by Odin himself, So, I forget where I was going to go with that, but anyways, I digress. It talks also about blessings and affection. It talks about desire and pleasure and ecstasy. It talks about spiritual rewards, success, recognition of one's own worth. What more positive of a reading could we probably get in terms of runes? I can't conceive of. Every bit of this was about prosperity, spiritual, being crowned for your persistence and, not giving in and so on and so forth. And the fact that You are moving forward, blessed from God himself, or in the representative of, in the Norse pantheon, of course, is Odin. And the mighty Freyja as well shows up here. Or Frigg. I mean, the Fehu runic, and depending on who you read, and that's the worst thing about all of this, is authors have differing views on what is not, and what they all mean, and stuff like that. So I'm trying to derive from this, how I feel about this, as well as the mythological connections, what I can get from that, and how it compares to other things, like in the Western way of thinking in terms of divination, like with the tarot cards. And I know I've seen runic cards that are used in tarot readings. They didn't have the same type of belief system in terms of the astrological, Western mostly accepted beliefs. But even that has changed in time. You have to understand that. I mean, we went from a 13-month calendar, to a 12-month calendar, and basically, from a lunar to a solar calendar, which was very much in keeping with a lot of the indigenous populations throughout the entire world at that time, including Aztecs, Mayans, and everything else. So, there's a lot to be said about what has been, accepted and generally believed to be its way it's always been, and it's the right thing, versus the reasons why they were changed. One, two, what that could mean significantly in terms of where we are now versus, where we could be, should be, where we have been. I mean, that's a whole subject by itself, and I would love to get into it, but then I would have to digress. And I do that enough as it is. So, but it's a very fascinating, endeavor, trying to discover truth in a world that is literally just saturated with lies, misconceptions, a maze of deception, in fact. And it becomes very clear as you start to turn over stones that some people have gone to great lengths to make it very difficult to ascertain or discover any truth. And this is why the large book burnings have occurred multiple times throughout history, not just the Library of Alexandria. There's been many of those types of events that have happened, and almost equally, expanded or expansive gatherings of the world's information at that time. So, and a lot of that remaining information was forwarded by a few, kept from the many, and then they more or less recreate an entire scenario, what they want you to believe. And that's been my experience trying to ascertain truth in this world. So there's a concerted effort to keep us from finding the truth. And most of those who do, whatever it may be, scientifically, in ways to better our lives and so on, that don't damage the environment, those kind of people end up either suiciding themselves, presumably, or they just simply disappear. Very few of them give in to the temptation to be bought out and things of that nature. One of the greatest inventors of all time, last century, Nikola Tesla. I mean, he died basically penniless. And of course, the moment he died, the U.S. government goes in and confiscates all of his records, all of his, work and everything else. And, his family's been trying desperately to get it back, some of which they've gotten back, but the majority of it is probably still in the hands of these greedy fucks that, presumably would like to believe that they rule over us. So that's the world that we actually live in. It's not about what they're doing for you and me, because they could care less about us. We're nothing more than a commodity until we aren't. And then we become a liability. So let's have another war, or let's have another epidemic, a plague, or whatever the case may be. Most of these things are not happening by happenstance. They don't happen as so-called acts of God. They would like to think that they are gods, but they are not. If anything, they're quite from the other direction, so to speak. So, but anyways, again, I digress. I could talk about that stuff all day long and give you an example after an example. I've made movies, I've written books and songs and everything else about these subjects. So, if you're interested in that, for the handful of you that actually watch my readings, just go ahead and let me know, and I'd be happy to share some of this stuff with you. I plan on doing all of this once I actually get settled into a place where I can do this in a more industrious fashion. Until then, you all stay victorious, and in the distant future, we will all finally meet in spirit to do battle that one last time, so-called, in Valhalla. Ragnarok, as they say, basically the Norse belief system. That's their equivalent of their Armageddon scenario, which is also covered under the Hindu beliefs and many other beliefs for that matter. So there is going to come a reckoning, and that reckoning is going to be very magnificent, and it's going to result in a lot of calamity, and destruction has to happen before rebirth, can happen. And that's exactly Jiva's job, in the Hindu belief. So he's an interesting character without a doubt in that belief system. So I read the Bhagavad Gita more than once. I'm not an expert at it, but I have the words of it written on my arm here. This one deals with being a soldier, to do the right thing irregardless of outcome. It's much like what what Islam teaches their disciples in a lot of ways. Basically, you will have your grandeur, when you do go to the other side, because you stood, in the gap, so to speak, and you endured all the hardships and everything else that a warrior has to endure, to do battle, even though you had nothing else really invested or any other reason to do that except to help and to protect and, to defend other people, basically. Now, I know that we have a false sense of what that is in today's world, being a Marine of 12 years and, seeing everybody cheer us when we came back from Iraq and, seeing what I saw. I didn't see a reason to celebrate. We decimated their entire country. We stole many of the archaeological and, of course, their great amounts of resources. They had a lot of gold as well as a lot of oil. We stole it all, basically. And we did that with many other countries. So I am not blinded to my affiliation with the Marine Corps. Even though I believe in the Marines, I believe in the brotherhood and what we stood for and what we were capable of doing. I just think that, in the words of Major General Smedley Butler, that war is a racket, and it's controlled completely for those who are trying to profit from it at our expense. And we think we're in there fighting for something else altogether. And I was one of those people, more than once. So, again, I got to see, and it woke me up. And, again, this is one of the reasons why I'm here. And I know that I'm talking too much, and nobody's listening probably at this point. Sometimes this is like self-therapy. I talk to myself, I guess, knowing that nobody else is going to listen. And that's okay. I still wish you all the very best, and that I'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.